guess if everybody's quiet, that means it's time to get started. Okay, my name is Rich Zach. I am the chair of the WSU Faculty Senate, and I have the honor and privilege of introducing our president, Daniel J. Bernardo, who was named interim president for the four-campus Washington State University system on July 7th, 2015, following the passing of Dr. Elson Floyd. On May 16th, 2014, Dan was named provost and executive vice president of Washington State University. He served in the role on an interim basis from June 1, 2013 to May 15th, 2014. Dan has extensive experience in higher education, including teaching, research, administration, and policy development. He served as vice president for Agriculture and Extension and Dean of the College of Agricultural, Human, and Natural Resource Sciences from 2005 to 2013. Prior to moving to Washington State University, Dan was professor and department head of the Department of Agricultural Economics at Kansas State University from 1995 through 2005. And Dr. Bernardo, Dan, has his PhD in agricultural economics from the Washington State University, and a BS in agricultural and managerial economics from University of California, Davis. I've known Dan for a long time. I served as chair when he was the dean of the college, and he was a very good dean for the most part. Okay, as this is our I'm going to take a little liberty. I apologize for doing this. If somebody yells at me afterwards, that's fine, but it's easier to get, forgiveness than it is permission. So this is our 125th anniversary, and I just wanted to do a very, very short reading from a book, Historical Sketch of the State College of Washington, 1890-1925, by our third president, Bryant. So this is the beginning of the university. The State College opens its doors. The State College of Washington opened its doors for instruction on the 13th day of January, 1892. The building, a one-story brick structure, 36 by 60 feet, the contract price of which was $1,500, stood on the summit of the hill where now, 1927, the old gymnasium stands. The brick wall forming the west end of the large room of the gymnasium formed the rear wall of the crib, as the little building for the infant college was later called by students. On the night of the 12th, one of the first students enrolled in the institution kept the fires burning in the stoves to dry the plaster and render the building endurable for the opening of the next day. So I think anybody that walks out of here, it tells you we have made a lot of progress since 1892, and I'm sure Dan is going to tell us about how we're going to continue that progress. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich. It's always a wild card when Rich introduces you. Came out fairly unscathed. I was at a conference, the Seattle Chamber Conference, and the person threw away the bio, and the night before she was out running around talking to our people about me so she could get some fun things. So this was Thursday night, or Thursday morning. And so she closed with the fact that I was a 49er fan, and I got a rousing set of boos from everybody. Well, first of all, thank you, everybody, for your attendance here. I know that there are people attending this virtually, and thank you for your attendance in that way. Of course, those folks that are urban campuses, as well as just those around this campus who like to sit in their office and get some work done while they're perhaps listening. So thank you to everybody throughout the system who have taken the time to come today so that we could have this dialogue. As a longtime WSU alum and as a kind of an avid Coug, it really is a humbling experience to serve in this role during this important stage of our university's history. When we look at this year, 2015, there's no doubt that this will be looked upon as one of the most transformational years in WSU's long and storied history. So far in 2015, as you know, we've celebrated our 125th anniversary, as Rich mentioned. We received a record $166 million in private support during FY15, which concluded this year in July. We also received just about $200 million of extramural funding during that year to advance our research, our academic, and our extension missions. We wrapped up our campaign closing at $1,066 million, which is just a tremendous accomplishment, really for everybody, not just the development staff, but that truly is a team effort that everybody contributed to. We gained legislative authorization for the first public medical school in over 70 years in this state. And we've completed several new facilities as you look across our campuses to, again, accommodate our growing academic enterprises. Those included the Wine Science Center at WSU Tri-Cities. If you haven't seen that and you're in the Tri-Cities, you should definitely stop by. The PACCAR building is nearing completion here in Pullman, and as you know, the Global Scholars Residence Hall opened on time, miraculously. Thank you, Olivia and her group. That was a very close call, but that opened. And if you haven't been to Global Scholars, which is over by the soccer field, you should do so, because they've kind of redefined what residential life is on a university campus. We've initiated some new capital projects, including the University Center in Everett, which we broke ground on last month, the Health Science Clinic in Spokane, again, which is under construction as we talk, and we have begun planning and will break ground on 2 additional facilities here in Pullman, the Digital Classroom Building, which will provide much-needed state-of-the-art classroom space for our expanded teaching mission, and the Multicultural Center, which will be located over by the entrance of campus. This fall, we enrolled the largest number of students in the history of Washington State University, just a shade under 30,000 total students across the campus. This from a university that was really struggling and kind of hovering around 23,000 for several years. And finally, we developed the university's first comprehensive research plan in decades, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Obviously, 2015 will be also remembered on a very negative note as we lost our 10th president, Elson Floyd, to his battle with cancer. And obviously, his legacy will live forever at Washington State University and will guide us in the years to come. You know, the past 4 months, as I've served in this role, have really tested the mettle of this university. But I think we have exceeded all expectations, and that really is the result of the work of everybody. It doesn't have to do with me. It has to do with us. It has to do with every staff, faculty, and student. And when even Huskies will come up to me often and say how impressed they are how the university has handled this tragedy, and really some really unique things that followed the tragedy that kind of started off the beginning of the school year, including the smoke. So at this point, I just want to thank everybody for, again, faculty, students, staff, the administration, the alumni, for all of their support and their resolve during this time, because we really have shined well as an institution. Now, during this transition period, we have elected consciously to move the university forward and not to sit back and wait for the next leader of Washington State to define where we need to go. As most of you know, Elston and I were close colleagues, we were close friends. We worked together for 8 years, the entire 8 years he was here. We shared a common vision of the modern land-grant university. And the regents and President Floyd, the last time I ever saw him, about 2 weeks before his death, were very clear in their direction, and that was to continue to push forward with the initiatives and the vision that he had put in place here. So we will continue, and we have continued to move forward with the vision that Elson had put in place with the leadership team here. And as you will hear and as you know, we are not short on initiatives as well, and we'll talk about some of those initiatives here shortly. So our accomplishments over the past several years have been impressive and encouraging, and I want to share just a few of those with you in slide form. If we think about our enrollment, and hopefully somebody's going to advance that, or am I advancing that? Okay, thank you. If we think about our enrollment here, this is a much larger university in terms of students than it was just 8 years ago. Our undergraduate enrollment in particular has grown significantly. We've grown about 30% over that time period across the system. We've grown at all campuses across our system. We've also grown in graduate and professional degrees, degree-seeking students, not to the same degree. And this is a highlight issue for us as we move forward. As we advanced our undergraduate enrollment without a commensurate increase in percentage of graduate students, we have tilted the ratio of undergraduate to graduate students at our institution. And we need to think about what that means and what the optimal ratio looks like, because it does not look like what it did 8 years ago. In terms of research, we've done a really great job expanding our research portfolio and our research outcomes. Obviously, one measure is research expenditures, and we've grown our research expenditures significantly over the last decade, and really have been able to hold on to those increases. Really, the sort of flat plateau in the last 5 years is an accomplishment, because obviously the number of opportunities for our scientists in which to pursue federal funding has been limited significantly during that time, but we've been able to hold our own when many universities have seen a dramatic fall off of their research expenditures. If you look at if you look at our discoveries, our disclosures, and our patents, we've increased those markedly, and this has been a conscious effort. Again, next slide, please. This has been a conscious effort on the part of us and our research faculty to really ramp up our commercialization efforts. And with the hard work of Anson Fatland and his group in economic development, we've seen a nice ramp up, if you will, in commercialization, in patents, in filings, et cetera. And finally, and this is an interesting slide, I think, this final slide. Thank you. If you look at, this is just a, if you proxy the size of our institution using revenue, I'm an economist, so I guess that makes sense to me. You could use revenue or expenditures. It follows very much the same pattern. But we've dramatically increased the size of our university in terms of budget. But we'll talk about a little later how that composition of those revenues and those expenditures has changed dramatically over time. But just as we have increased the size of our institution, and that is a fact, and I think a significant accomplishment. If we think about the strategic direction of our university, over the past 4 months, I have visited with literally hundreds of policymakers, legislators, newspaper editors, industry leaders, alumni, mayors, talking about WSU, talking about our mission. And our message at WSU, what we're trying to accomplish, could not have been received any better. Our vision of a contemporary land-grant university, one focused on access, one focused on excellence in research and engagement with industry and citizens, to assist them in addressing the most pressing problems that they face across the state of Washington, across the nation, and even the world. That message is absolutely spot on. It could not be better, and it shows up in a variety of ways, and it definitely showed up in how we were treated in the legislature this past year. This vision of service to the state, of access, of service to the people is our why. Kim, it's our why. And that is why we exist as an institution. And that is why, hopefully, we all come to work, because you have to have the why before you define the what and the how. So hopefully, we can all get behind this why. As we move forward, the guiding light for the strategic, for our advancement of this mission is our strategic plan. We have the strategic plan. I always carry a copy with me. I hope I have one. Yes. We have our strategic plan, and that's an important document that we are really trying to keep in front of us and keep as a living document. So the two defining themes of this plan are a transformative student experience and an AAU-like research profile, if just to paraphrase. The strategic plan contains a very detailed implementation plan. In fact, the plan's only 5 pages, the implementation plan's about 10, which I guess says something about how I think strategic plans should be used and can be used. We've developed, under the leadership of Erica Austin, the current co-provost, we've developed a institutional effectiveness council. That's essentially the implementation committee for the strategic plan. They've defined 55 metrics, which will help us monitor our progress in the plan. And they've benchmarked those, set where we are last year, and then where we want to be in each of those 55 metrics over the life of the plan, at the conclusion of the plan. So we will be reporting on that plan annually, and our first report will come out at the beginning of the calendar year. Okay, so we're going to try to live this thing, and we will report all 55 metrics, not just the ones that we feel good about, because that is what we committed to the university to do, and we will do just that. If we talk about those two major themes, the transformative student experience, much of what we've tried to accomplish there is in the general realm of what we call student success. And student success is ultimately measured by our retention of our students and ultimately the graduation and the post-graduation success of our students. While our retention rates are above the national average, they're not where we want them to be. I don't think any of them are where we want to be. The one that's of particular concern to many of us is the first-year retention rate, which hovered around 80% for the last few years. So we are losing students that first year and really need to focus on that first-year experience. There's been a lot of initiatives coming out of the provost office, out of student services, out of the individual colleges that have been directed towards improving that retention rate. We've done things like using data analytics to try to identify at-risk students. We've built learning communities to try to group students together and build community that they can identify with. We've pre-enrolled our students in need of developmental work in those developmental course sections. No longer can you put off developmental math till your senior year. I think that's a good idea. And we've done many, many other things, in biology and in chemistry, and trying to improve the curriculum and the success of some of these first-year courses. Student success, of course, all of those who are educators and have spent time in undergraduate classes know that that's significantly influenced by admission. So let's just talk a little bit about admission. We've made some significant changes in admission over the course of the last couple years. One thing that we did was we moved enrollment management, which is admissions, recruiting, financial aid, Brian's down here, to the provost office. So we did that in 2014. So really this last fall was the first year where our class was really completely recruited under this new organization. We brought in about 4,720 freshmen system-wide, which was a significant increase. We had increases in all campuses. In Pullman, we had about a 300 student increase here on this campus. We also increased our transfer enrollment by about 13%. We increased our out-of-state enrollment by about 30%, but interestingly, while that may sound a little bit tricky from a state land grant standpoint, we still stand at about 85% of our freshman students, or pardon me, our undergraduate students being Washington residents. So we made major progress in the enrollment front, but we also did that, I might add, by maintaining our commitment that our undergraduate student body will reflect the changing demographics of Washington State. So this current freshman class is about 36% students of color and about 41% first-generation college students. I think you've heard those statistics. But we also did that. We also maintained that demographic composition and increased our enrollment by fairly significantly changing the academic preparedness of our undergraduate students. Average SAT and average high school grade point average has gone up. Through analytics, we identified a group of students who weren't having success as first-year students at Washington State University. We did not admit those students. It does no one any good, and most notably the student, to recruit students who can't be successful here as freshmen. We'd love to have those students as sophomores or juniors, but we declined about 400 to 500 students that probably would have been admitted to WSU a couple, 3 years ago. So we are trying to make sure that we use the best information possible to assure that our students can be successful, and then make sure that we have the infrastructure around them for them to be successful and to be retained. And that's how we plan on increasing that first year retention rate. And I really appreciate everybody's work. Erica's worked a tremendous amount on this ever since she came to the provost office a couple years ago. But she has a whole team of people, the Student Success Council, that's working with her on this from all campuses and all colleges. The second major initiative we talked about was research, and I think our story there this year is a very good one. As I said, we've put together a research plan. We have the first comprehensive research plan really in forever, as far as I know. I don't really know when the last comprehensive research plan was. So under Chris Keene, the new vice president, not really new anymore, but the vice president for research, he's done a great job working with literally a couple hundred faculty to develop that research plan. You know, the high visibility part of that plan is the grand challenges, and that's fine, but I always point people to the other recommendations from that plan because there's some important recommendations about how we go about advancing research that are beyond simply the identification of the grand challenges. Chris and his colleagues have completely reorganized the Office of Research, really focusing on additional resources for research advancement, for proposal development, and for grant management administration. We have to be able to organize to be competitive for large interdisciplinary grants. We have to be able to deliver on those and manage those once we receive them without absolutely killing our best faculty. We've also moved the Office of Economic Development, which is where all of our commercialization efforts are, into the Office of Research to better connect commercialization to our research endeavors. I think that's an important structural thing as well. And, you know, I would say that that advancing our research mission and our outcomes from research has to be a high priority for this university. It has to be a higher priority for this university, and it's going to demand a lot more investment. I really feel that, and Chris and I have worked on that. Chris, the Office of the Vice President for Research is the only vice presidential level that received a funding increase this year during a very tight budget time, but we just had to squeeze out some dollars, not only for compliance, but for producing or for developing some resources to advance research. So that those are a few highlights about where we're going on those two major areas of the strategic plan. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about some key initiatives, and really, you know, this is an important part of what I wanted to address with folks today, because there is a lot going on at Washington State University. Elson used to talk about how he would put a bow around things, and, you know, like, oh, we got the med school approved, and put a bow around that, and I would often kid him that, yeah, and I get the package as provost, because somebody's got to execute these things. And you know, he handed a fair number of packages to me as provost, and now I have those, you know, kind of in my lap as president, and then I have a couple co-provosts that I can put them on them. The medical school, obviously the first large initiative, or the most prominent large initiative we have, is the advancement of the medical school. We are making significant progress with the target of having our first medical students on the Spokane campus in August of 2017. That is Elson time. That is a very, very aggressive agenda. I want to recognize, I think I saw Ken Roberts here. Ken is somewhere. Ken, there he is. I want to recognize Ken and Chancellor Brown for their incredible work continuing to push this initiative forward. I mean, they have done really yeoman's work all the way through this process, and including enabling the authorization through the legislature. As you know, we've hired a new dean, Dr. John Tom Koviak. We hired him in 2 months. That's beyond Elson time. He's a great hire. He's been involved in 3 LCME accreditations. He's led a couple of those. He's already working for us 50% time. He's also working for his previous employer 50% time. But that's been really critical as we try to develop our curriculum and go through the review of our curriculum as part of the LCME process. We plan on submitting our documents around December 1st of this year. As I noted, we also are making progress on our interdisciplinary clinic on the Spokane campus. So all things are moving forward with respect to the medical school. Now, let's have the first big question. So there's about 3 big questions through here. What's the question on a lot of people's minds? It's, will the medical school essentially suck funds from my program or other programs at Washington State University? The answer to that question is no, it should not if we execute this plan properly. Why? First of all, this is a community-based program. Community-based programs do not use or build or run teaching hospitals, expensive clinician practices. We're partnering with health science providers for that piece, okay? We also have a large number of the faculty already employed, many of whom have extensive experience teaching medical students from the WWAMI program. We have the facility we need in place. In fact, much of our facility is actually better than some of the teaching resources at the University of Washington. So facilities are in place for this particular program. The operating dollars for the medical school essentially come from 5 different sources. The first one is we were able to retain all of the medical education funding from the legislature that was allocated during the WWAMI years. So we have that allocation, okay? We have also a small startup set of funds from the legislature this year. Future legislative allocations will build upon this, if you will, permanent budget, okay? So when the legislature passed this medical school authorization, with it is the realization that they have to fund it over time. Now, obviously, you know, there are no guarantees in the world of state politics, but the key leaders of the legislature are fully understand that they did not fund the medical school, and they're obligated to fund that over time if we are going to advance the number of seats. And this is, you know, kind of an incremental approach where you just don't start with a full class of students. You ramp up your student size, and we ramp up the student size as the legislature enables us to through funding. Also, student tuition and fees are an important source of operating dollars. Funding from our healthcare provider partners is another important source. And finally, gifts are an important source. And we have about a $100 million goal for the next 4 years, which is a completely manageable goal for our development team. So personally, you know, I'm an economist. I'm not an accountant, but I can read pro formas fairly well. Those of you the deans and folks who work with me as a provost know that I love budgets and numbers, and you know, the pro formas stack up, okay? We can execute this according to the fiscal plan we have, but it's going to take administration and commitment. The second major initiative I wanted to talk about was Everett. As many of you know, we took over the University Center at Everett about 2 years ago, which was on the community college campus there. That is basically a program to deliver 2+2 programs, primarily in the STEM area. We have received funding for 6 programs at that location: mechanical and electrical engineering, hospitality, business management, strategic communication, and new funding for data analytics and computer engineering. That program's going fantastic. We owe a lot of kudos to the folks in engineering in particular. They have the longest running programs, and they're doing great work delivering accredited engineering degrees to place-bound students in Everett. Last month, we broke ground on a new facility there. That will be a great place for us to launch new programs in Everett as well. The idea behind Everett is much bigger than just having 2+2 STEM-related programs. We really believe Everett can be our foothold, our front porch in that area to serve those industries, okay? And that's an important location for us because we have been disadvantaged by our locations, in particular Pullman, in serving the advanced manufacturing and aerospace industry. Now, many of you have heard and have a lot of questions about Bellevue. We're very, very upfront about what's going on in Bellevue. We are in conversation with Bellevue College, which is essentially a two-year institution there, about bringing that institution into the WSU system as a campus within our system that is an open access campus for 2- and 4-year degree programs. This has been done in close cooperation with the Faculty Senate. It's not just an administration-driven thing. Everybody who's been involved in this venture, even those most skeptical starting out, begin to see the tremendous opportunity that this particular one presents. Why? The first reason is Bellevue College has 37,000 headcount students. It's larger than WSU's combined enrollment. Not all those are degree-seeking students, but the large number of them definitely can be, okay? And they certainly can provide enrollment growth and opportunity to Washington State University. We're providing access to 4-year degrees for place-bound students in what they call the East Side, which still bothers me to call that the East Side, but I'm trying to get used to being sort of in Western Washington. It's a place where we really can do some great work recruiting international students. Bellevue is highly successful in recruiting international students, and really also students who aren't ready for one of our campuses. So I mentioned that there was about 500 students that we didn't enroll this year, freshmen, who we could have enrolled in an open access institution and had them in our system. And then we can pipeline those successful students into our other campus, or they can stay at the Bellevue campus as well. There are a lot of considerations to work out still with respect to this project, but we're really encouraged by this project, and it is one in which a lot of people in the state are really interested in because you may not know this, but the state of Washington is 46th in the nation in terms of 4-year degree completion per capita. We have to do something different than what we're doing as a state, and many policymakers are really interested in this because it does provide a different model. Another initiative that I'll just briefly talk about is what we often call the Systemness Initiative. Apologies to the English folks in the audience. Systemness is an initiative really to try to better connect the various campuses that make up the one university geographically dispersed WSU model. So we've been working very actively on both administrative and academic issues. There have been some task forces working. On the administrative side, there was a task force, actually a set of them, that came up with about, I think it was 68 recommendations on how we can improve the interconnectivity of our system in the various administrative areas. We've implemented about 2/3 of those recommendations and are looking at several more. So we really need to focus on connecting our system. On the academic side, it's very important that we continue to engage in this effort. We cannot leave our colleagues in urban campuses without the same rights and privileges of those in Pullman or Spokane or wherever. Everybody needs the same rights and privileges. Everybody needs to be able to access graduate education. If we're going to hire tenure and tenure track people in our urban campuses, we have to be more serious about providing them access, full access as colleagues. And that's really what the whole initiative is about on the academic side. Okay, I'd like to kind of close up my comments to talk a little bit about budget. Now, traditionally in these types of talks, we wouldn't be digging into budget, and we're not going to really dig in by my definition, but I'm going to give you a little bit more resolution than probably you've seen before. So if you don't like budget, you know, you can doze off. If you do, you can open your eyes. So we saw earlier that revenues and expenditures at WSU have increased significantly. We've increased the size of the institution some 45% over the last several years. But the sources of the revenue have changed dramatically. This is that same slide, except for there's some color bars in here to note the sources of the revenues, okay? The primary areas of growth you can kind of see as being grants and contracts, which I can't see that far with this angle. Maybe I can. Grants and contracts are gray, very appropriately, I guess. So the primary sources you see are grants and contracts and tuition and fees. We've dramatically increased those amounts. Tuition has gone from about 15% of our total expenditures to over 30%. Okay? At the same time, the state allocation, which is the red at the bottom, has gone from about 30-some% to less than 15%. So we are becoming, as you've heard, less and less a state-funded institution. It is up to us to drive our growth and to drive our funding as an institution. If you look at the next slide, this shows the distribution of our operating budget, the distribution of these revenues. The important thing here is the only sources of revenue that are really flexible and can be allocated to accomplish our ends are the red and the green, okay? Our tuition and the state dollars, state allocation. Everything else there is for a purpose. So grants and contracts are for meeting the objectives of those grants and contracts. The various service areas, housing and dining, for example, is to feed the student. So only those two blocks or those two wedges are capable of driving us strategically. So if you look at those two blocks, tuition represents 60% of those flexible funds, okay? So what's the message here? The message is if you don't think tuition's important and enrollment's important, that's why, okay? It's vivid. We are a tuition-driven institution, and it affects everybody, including the researcher who hasn't seen an undergraduate student in a classroom in 50 years, if we have any of those, okay? That same researcher, that tuition money is funding, you know, the lights and everything else that goes into his or her lab. So tuition is important for everybody, and those undergraduate students are really, really important. So we focused a lot during this transition period on budget because we really need to take a hard look at the academic budget and the non-academic budget of this university. And it's a good time to do it because it's hard to invoke change sometimes if you're a new person, okay? And this is a good time to perhaps do some difficult things. There are two significant issues on budget that we need to be aware of. One is that we self-financed essentially 2 salary programs over the last 2 years. Okay, so the first salary program, if you recall, there was no state allocation whatsoever. That salary program cost us $15 million recurring, okay? Recurring, not just 1 year, because you kind of want your salary increase for the next years too, right? The second one was the one we just implemented in January 1st of this year. And we implemented that one, as you know, and we've been very, very transparent about this. We implemented that one hoping that the legislature would cover all or part of it. They covered about half of it. So we have another recurring obligation there. And these have required us to really dip into our, for lack of a better term, carry forwards or our retained balances. The second major issue that we have budget-wise, I alluded to just a second ago, we have to get adapted to a tuition-driven budget, to being able to use tuition and the enrollment money that colleges receive for tuition to really advance the institution, not just teach our undergraduate courses. So we've taken 3 steps during this transition period to try to deal with this and to try to improve our budget situation and get us positioned so we can grow the university in a really positive way to meet our strategic priorities in the plan. We're doing 3 things, as I said. The first one you probably heard about, and that is we are engaging in a 5% reallocation exercise. So at the end of this fiscal year, we're asking all VPs and all deans to return, well, essentially to take 5% of this year's PBL and put it into a central reallocation pool. That reallocation pool will be used for 2 purposes. One, our highest priority, salaries, so to backfill the salaries that we didn't receive funding for from the legislature. And 2, to advance our strategic priorities. So every dollar of that reallocation pool will either go to salary and benefits or our priorities of student success and our research grant challenges. The other things we're doing, we're looking at our academic allocation budgets, how we allocate our tuition money for summer school, for our enrollment-based budget model in Pullman, which gives colleges a large fraction of tuition growth that has occurred since 2011. We're looking at that model that was introduced during former Provost Bailey's time, who's back there in the back row. And then we're also looking at our F&A distribution model. How do we change our F&A distribution such that we can grow our research enterprise? When we grow F&A, how are we able to reallocate this to grow our research enterprise? Chris Keen's leading that effort. So these are major analyses going on, major efforts going on to try to provide us the fiscal resources we need to continue to advance WSU. In closing, I just want to thank all of you for your support, your hard work during really the last several years. You know, we've come out of the worst budget crisis in the state's history. We came out of that better than really any 4-year institution in Washington State because we did take care of business. We did make some tough decisions. We did literally cut budgets as opposed to, if you will, kicking the can down the road. That's allowed us to respond more quickly and to advance ourselves in a much more proactive way and priority manner. We want to thank all of you for faculty, staff, for hanging with us during this time. a lot of people have a lot of options, and there were numerous universities, parked outside of Pullman hoping to poach our very best faculty and staff, and we really do appreciate you hanging with us. I mean, that is something that we so much appreciate, and hopefully as we advance into the future, you will receive the dividends for that decision. It's an exciting time. We have a lot of exciting initiatives that you've heard about, and several others. And what we're going to do now is just have a dialogue, a question and answer period. I'd like to have 3 of my compatriots come up and join me so that I can pass off the difficult questions to them. So I'm going to ask the co-provost, Erica Austin and Ron Middlehammer, to come up, as well as our Vice President for Research, Chris Keene, to occupy the stools. And while they're coming up, I think we have some mics floating around. Is that right? We have mics floating around. If you'd like to raise your hand and offer the first question. Wow, we covered it all. It's always difficult to get the first one out. Yes, AG's here.
Thank you, Dan. You talked about Bellevue, and you described it as bringing it into the system.
Okay, good, yeah.
Are we going to be articulating with Bellevue all of the degrees that they have, or most of them? Or are we going to be much more strategic about that, the way you talked about Everett?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maybe we didn't get the mic to him. The question was Bellevue, bringing them into the system. What's that going to look like? Are we going to bring in all their degrees, et cetera? I missed an important point about the Bellevue project. We have this, and then we'll get to the degree question. One important point is that we won't be, in all likelihood, bringing in Bellevue in our traditional one university geographically dispersed model. The faculty will be a separate faculty. They will be a separately accredited institution. The students there will receive something that might be called like a WSU Bellevue College degree. So it's a little bit different model. The reason for that is that we are essentially this is a merger, and so we're essentially bringing in a faculty and degree programs, and that faculty isn't a 4-year research intensive university faculty. And so this is a different model. It requires a different solution, and we are working on that. With respect to the degrees, they'll likely retain the vast majority of their 2-year degrees. We're going to give them a lot of autonomy, especially in the 2-year space, because we don't want to lose that. They're a high-quality 2-year institution that's serving an important function. So they will continue to offer those. They have a few 4-year degrees. One of those, for example, in nursing, obviously that will involve some work with our nursing program as we, kind of transform that to, a nursing program that probably resembles more of our own. They have some of these other applied bachelor's degrees. We'll just have to look at those, individually to decide what the fate of those are, and we will, do that together with them. So they will continue to maintain a 2-year, a very large, in fact, 2-year program and certificate programs. There are some pretty high-quality institutions around the country that offer research institution that offer 2-year degrees, and we are studying those. Obviously, the CUNY system does it. North Carolina State does it. Michigan State does it. So there's some models out there.
Along probably the same line of question, how does the Washington State University system compare to, say, some other states where, like, say, California, where they have a state university system, University of California system, and would we be better served if we integrated them into Washington, like, say, Central Washington University,
Oh.
Eastern Washington? We have all these different
Right.
systems, so I wondered.
Yeah, it's actually a good question, one that's outside of certainly our domain. Yeah, we don't have a comprehensive system, although neither does California, because they have a 3-tiered system. That's my home state, and the system and the tiers don't interact very well. So they have a community college, a state university system, and then the UC system. Would we be? I don't know if we'd be better as an integrated system, but I think it's unquestionable, and if we want to really get after the 46-degree completion ranking, I think we really have to worry about how we're better organized as a state and across that system, as you point out. We used to have a higher education coordinating board. They had to approve degrees, et cetera. And to be quite frank, right now, it's a little bit like the wild, wild west out there. You can pretty much do whatever you want, and I don't know where we're going to go in terms of coordination from the state level, but there is a need for it. So it's a good observation, actually, on your part. All of those institutions act fairly independently. When I meet with provosts or now presidents from those the other 4-year institutions, we very much align with the University of Washington as opposed to the others. Because of the research programs we have and we're doctoral granting institutions, the 2 doctoral granting institutions. But nobody really has defined particularly very well what the various participants in the system, what their role is, and in changing that 46th ranking. Thanks.
Dan?
You mentioned earlier the 3 burning questions. Did we get those answered well? You talked about the medical school, but what were the other 2?
Right. Thanks, because I missed one. The other burning question that a lot of people have is, and I did miss that one, and I appreciate that, is what are we doing and why are we at all these different locations? Okay, sometimes phrased, why aren't we doing that in Pullman? Why aren't we doing the medical school in Pullman? Why aren't we doing Everett in Pullman? The answer to that question is, the same one that the realtors use. It's location, location, and location. As I said, we are no longer in a situation where we can just take our state allocation and allocate it to do kind of whatever we want to do. We haven't received $1 in a decade that wasn't targeted for a particular program or a particular location. Okay? So they don't, that's how the feds work now too. So the reason why we're there is we have to advance private and public partnerships to grow the university and to accomplish what we want to do, particularly in research. And so if you think about health sciences, why are we in Spokane? Well, because Spokane is the largest catchment area for health sciences between Seattle and Minneapolis. If you're going to build health sciences, you have to have health science professionals around you, okay? That's the whole clinical component of what we do. And Spokane literally is the best location between Seattle and Minnesota, okay? If you think about Everett, as I've said, we haven't been particularly very adept at connecting to many of those advanced manufacturing industries around Everett. And it's just, to be honest with you, part of it's just that we're a long ways away. So we need to use Everett as our place where not only are we connecting Everett to Boeing and other industrial partners, but we're also connecting Pullman Engineering and Pullman Communication and Pullman Business straight through there. That's why hospitality's there. So it's really, so that location is become more and more important to build partnerships and to build funding. The building in Everett, it would not have been funded had it been in Pullman, Washington. Just a simple fact. I'm not, if you want to, I'm not going to say exactly why, but let's just say the Capital Committee had a composition that led us to that outcome, okay? So we have to take advantage of those things, and that's just the new reality of living in this state and pretty much any other state, I think, to access public and private resources. Yep, right here.
My question is regarding the grand challenges, and I wanted to know how are we going to promote research in these specific areas, and will it hurt research in other areas?
Yeah, I'll let Chris handle that one, and I'll backfill for him. But we'll let Chris Keene talk about that some.
Okay. Oh, I guess I can't. Okay, I'll just talk this way. Okay, great question. So yeah, let me address that. So I think the short answer is, the grand challenges are really meant to provide an additional research outlet in multidisciplinary areas. They're meant to complement, the university's historical strength and individual investigator work, which is really the bedrock of how we build our research enterprise. It's individual researchers getting grants, accumulating expertise, becoming visible, having great reputations and recognition. So it's really meant to be additive. There is no process going on to explicitly change from this type of research to that. It's really the option to do more multidisciplinary work. I think the strategy to implement that is, obviously, as you know, the challenges are fairly broad, like sustaining health and so on. There are faculty groups that are working on this to identify specific problems that we're going to go after there, and those will be the seeds of better multidisciplinary grant proposals we'll turn in for funding in those areas, which will provide an additional research opportunity for faculty.
Okay. Yes.
I was very pleased to hear about the data analytics and the work on trying to select our freshmen more selectively, and I guess I'm a little curious where we're going forward in that area in the future. One area that, having done Alive for several years and others, we still see a huge number of students coming in with very deficient math backgrounds, and I'm wondering what's going to happen there, because if you have a pre-vet student that qualifies for Math 100 or 103, they're in a tough position. It seems to me they'd be better off getting the preparation they need elsewhere before they attempt something like that.
Yeah, I'll let Erica follow up on me on that. She's been working in a lot of these areas. I kind of spearheaded enrollment management for my term. Well, once we received it in 14 until I left, so I have some fairly specific points there. Yeah, we're trying to, we have done the analytics looking at first year retention and just trying to look at the factors that explain retention or loss of the student. And certainly there's many, they're not all academic. But on the academic side, we have found some high school grade point averages in particular that just explain a great deal of the loss of students, okay? So what we do is we use high school grade point average and SAT, and then, and obviously that cuts off a certain amount of the applicant pool. Obviously they're just too low. We've also looked at a strata where we go in and Wendy Peterson, is Wendy here? Wendy, who does a great job on admissions and enrollment, her and her team go in and then look at using a more holistic approach for that next strata up. And we also have some factors that we've identified. You know, it's not, you know, most of us are involved in science of one form or another. And we know it's not all, you know, that the average is just not a very good statistic. Average high school grade point average is just a, you know, pretty coarse statistic. So they can look at trends and particular courses and things like that. So we're just a lot more rigorous in what we're doing, especially down low, if you want to know the truth. I mean, there's some students that just aren't ready, period, and we figure that out, and we're just not admitting them. There are some students that might be ready, but there's some flags there, and we're just doing a much more rigorous job trying to sort them all out. And then, as I said, for those that we do admit, if they do need developmental work, we're pre-enrolling them in those developmental courses. You cannot delay developmental math until you're a senior after you've taken, you know, courses that require that knowledge. So I think we're doing a better job. You know, what I tried to communicate there was that we have a lot more work to do, okay? You know it, I know it, I'm not hiding it. Some people, I thought, tended to hide it a little bit. We have to continue to ratchet up our admissions. You know, we need to continue to identify and work identifying students who aren't ready to be at WSU. But at the same time, if we're going to deny admission to those based upon, and it is in a budget thing, we have to recruit harder to backfill with qualified and high-performing students. So that's our strategy. I don't know, Erica, anything else there?
I think that covers it pretty well. The thing that I might add is that, or emphasize also, is that we really are working hard to attract well-prepared students, to make sure that they know Washington State University is a place where you can go and you can really excel. There are a lot of different pathways you can take into and through Washington State University. We have our different campuses. We have a lot of programs. You can have you know, a wide array of options here. If you're coming in interested in lots of different majors and minors and activities and civic engagement and so on, lots of opportunities for you here that you might not find somewhere else. And if you're interested in having that you know, residential college experience, that campus experience, you can have that in Pullman. And if that's not something that's right for you, there are other options as well. And you can get engaged in research if you're a really academically oriented student, lots of opportunities for you. And you can also get some attention that you might not get at a place that might be a great deal larger than Washington State University in its various, you know, forms and locations. And so that combination can be the right fit for a lot of students. And what we're working really hard to do is identify those students for which Washington State University can be a really great fit, and also students who are really highly capable and ready to take advantage of those opportunities. And we're being more strategic in the way we reach out to them, the way we let them know what the opportunities are. We let them know about our honors college, among other things. In terms of financial aid, we have some really skilled, creative, and dedicated people who've been working on financial aid packages, both using central funds and state need grants, and also the collaboration from colleges, so that we can put really interesting packages together that can help students come here and pay more attention to their studies than to having to, you know, work multiple jobs to be able to fund their education. And they can take advantage of things like co-curricular activities and research opportunities and internships and study abroad, and the things that really do make your education special and uniquely useful, and position you for success when you graduate, not just for an entry-level job, but for leadership. And so that's really what we're doing. And that's all I'd add.
There's one in the back, towards the back. Before we do that, if
you wouldn't mind, I'm a little bit out of my bin here because we have responsibilities, and Erica is the expert in this area. But I'd like to add one other thing we need to think about, and that is to make sure that we provide that developmental training, that building training for those who need that before they can hit the mainstream, if you will, in the rest of the academic program, that we do that as best we can. We reach out, we make that very effective, and we go to a great distance to make sure we do everything we can to help those people that we let in. I mean, I think it's we should debate what that threshold is. I don't think that's a bright line in today's society. It's one thing to say we're going to recruit to a certain level and address the issue of effectiveness that way. The other thing is, what is that level? And when we let someone into WSU, and that requires that extra training and the developmental input before they hit their stride, we'll make sure we do that to our level best and make that a high-quality experience as well.
Thank you. I was just going to say that I wanted to just say that we're doing a lot of really good things here at WSU. I mean, I think that you're what Erica was just saying, and Dan, when you were talking about targeting different groups, and I just recently experienced that this year, well, and last year somewhat, but I give tours of my lab space to the incoming transfer students as part of the University College setup, and so and then this particular year was nice and refreshing because a whole subgroup of those individuals just pounced on me wanting to get into the lab and get into research, and so and I think that it's just real important, kind of thinking back to earlier parts of your discussion where we have these multiple institutions in the state, but I think that if we do work together, we definitely, it seems like we can, like someone's not at a community, doesn't have to be at a community college because they're not going to ever go to the university. It's like everyone has different backgrounds and reasons, but kind of giving them the proper outlet, which I think that WSU, I will say, is one of probably the best institutions for undergraduate opportunities that I've been exposed to. And I was in the UC system for grad school, and I've been in other systems, but I think we're doing a lot of really great things here too, and I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we're communicating that as well, because I do think we're doing a lot of great things. And you mentioned one thing that's really important, and we haven't gotten there yet, and that is, how do we use the power of the system to recruit and retain students? So if you just look at engineering, you can get a mechanical engineering degree in Bremerton, Everett, Pullman, Vancouver, and Tri-Cities. I would argue that while those are all fine accredited degrees, the environment, the learning environment, is different in all of those. If we can figure out how to allow students the opportunity to choose that best fits their style, not just by location, where they might be place-bound, but, what is the best place for them, and we differentiate by campus, this could be a really, really powerful system, and I think you were alluding to that. I think that's really right. I look at they're not kids. I look at the students at Everett, and I met with them, and it's like, wow, these are not your prototypical engineering students. A lot of them are veterans, highly diverse. Probably, I would say some of them might not have going in the skills that some of the students most of the students have at Pullman, but they're graduating, and they're doing great work, and they're getting jobs. Because it's a different place, and the faculty there can offer a different experience, and that's what we really need to capture in this system. So I think you're spot on.
I'm going to spin off of that a little bit too. I know I've talked with Kim and Laura, a couple colleagues of mine, about this. We talk about when students don't succeed and how they spin out and where we lose them in the system and where they go. What about those that are at risk that stay and that we keep and that we retain? What are we doing right? Instead of focusing on what we're doing wrong, what are we doing right? How can we do more of that? Are we collecting those data or thinking about that at all?
You want to take that, Eric?
Sure. The question, if you couldn't hear it, was what are we doing right with students who stay? There are some students who may be at risk of not succeeding and of dropping out, and what are we doing that helps them succeed? We're engaging with them. One of the things that we've done is invest in a predictive analytics system that helps advisors identify whether students are on track, a little bit off track, or maybe way off track. And the idea is to figure that out sooner rather than later, so you can intervene and help advisors, some of whom have much heavier loads, numbers of students they need to advise. It helps them do some triage, so the students who are doing just fine and would just as soon, not be bothered, don't have to spend a lot of time with their advisors, but the students who really need the help can get that help, and the advisors sometimes are extremely assertive about getting in touch with those students to try to get them into their offices or get them to whatever services they might need, whether it's tutoring or they're having issues with financial aid or they're maybe needing some help from counseling services or what have you. That system is going to be extended next semester. We're in the process of building out an extension to it that will come online probably midway through next semester, that will enable students to do online scheduling so they can be more proactive in getting help rather than having to go wander around campus and see what kinds of papers or sign-up sheets are on various faculty members' doors and advisors' doors to get help. They'll be able to do online scheduling with lots of different offices around campus. Faculty will be able to get involved with the system as well. They'll be able to do referrals back and forth across offices, and assessment is going to be part of all of this. And so the more, we're not trying to be scary in the kind of data that we're collecting, and we want to make sure that we're definitely sensitive to privacy concerns and security concerns, but we are collecting more and more data that help us understand what are the things that predict success and what are the things that predict the opposite, and what can we do that will really maximize success. So in some of our courses, especially freshman focus courses, we've had, and some of our early STEM courses, we've had really innovative faculty working hard to try things in their courses, experiment in their courses, flipping courses, adding elements from the book called The A-Game, which some of you may have heard of. Every entering student the last couple of years has gotten a copy of this book called The A-Game, which has 9 steps to academic success, one of which is go to class. And actually, I've been talking with some student leaders about let's have a go to class initiative. And they're pretty receptive to working with us on this, and students really listen to other students, and so we need to make sure that students are involved in this whole effort, and they're really ready to be involved. They want each other to be successful. They're ready to be mentors to each other, and so that's one of the things that's been getting going, is more mentoring of that sort. Getting students connected to their professors, helping professors get connected with their students, because there's sometimes shyness on both sides. I learned recently that there was a student who was shy about going to office hours because the student thought that office hours meant that's when a faculty member is trying to get something done in their office. And you're not supposed to bother them during those office hours. And so, and it actually means the opposite. So making sure students understand, sometimes the lingo that we use, we take for granted that people will understand. And some of our students coming in, we can't make those assumptions. We have to make sure they know what we're talking about. And so these are all things that we're doing, and we're collecting lots of these best practices. President Bernardo mentioned the Student Success Council. I'm grateful to everybody who's involved in that. We have people from the colleges, from the campuses, from lots of different offices, student affairs and business affairs and institutional research and various things, all coming together once a month to talk about what we're doing right and what we can do more of and where we need to put our attention. And then they get going into problem-solving groups, and they're working on 4 initiatives right now, and a lot of other initiatives have come about because of that. So I could go on for hours, but that's essentially what we're doing.
Yeah, I think we're doing a lot right, because if you look at the 80% statistic, first year retention, graduation rate 67. There's not many falling off after that first year. And one thing we got to really understand is this is not all academic casualty, if you will. Probably the most important thing we can do is connect them to community, right? I mean, that's, I think, and it's been proven by the exit interviews and things. And so, you know, the programs where we're building community for freshmen are very, very effective, no question. And certainly things like connecting them to, you know, research and connecting them to departments. You know, we moved, you know, we used to have advising, you know, we had centralized freshman advising not too long ago at the university college, you know. That was one of the initiatives we put in place shortly after I got to the provost office to go to college level, you know, to try to place those folks into a college in a department. Even if it's not the right one, they can connect to community. I mean, students that connect to AMDT, they've got a community. If they choose that they're not going to be in AMDT next year, okay, but at least they've connected to community and haven't been lost. So I think we're doing a lot right too. So, yeah.
So this is actually a good segue. Slight change in topic. So
Yeah.
we've increased undergraduate enrollment, which is obviously very important for the bottom line, but haven't really increased graduate enrollment. And the issue there in part is that graduate enrollment costs money to some degree, but it also is very important for accreditation. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, that's, I alluded to that because we've changed the composition of our campus, campuses, because we had large ramp up in undergraduate enrollment. We've increased graduate, but it's mainly come in the professional programs, okay, and a lot of it online. We have to figure out how to, you know, how to do this. If you know, nobody's asked about AAU, but if you look at our AAU profile, where we're most lacking is doctoral student graduation. This is something that we absolutely have to address as a university. You know, and it's part and parcel to increasing our research productivity as well, because graduate students increase research productivity. You know, we have some pretty good incentives out there. We're going to have to find some more. I don't know, Chris, if you have anything to add to that, but you know, one way we do it is if we can increase our research take, if you will, our extramural funding, that is a key source of funding those graduate students for sure. We've done a reasonably good job, by the way, of really kind of changing the composition of our graduate student body towards more doctoral students and fewer masters. That was a little bit controversial, but it was strategic, and people have responded really well to that.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Let me just add a few points. So first of all, in funding, obviously, that, you know, that is one way to do it. More grants equals more students you can support. And I haven't really had a chance to talk about this much globally yet, but as part of the strategic plan, we're looking at, you know, specific plans to enhance our you know, research funding by basically increasing, you know, it's just simple math. I like math too. I'm like Dan, I'm a physicist, but, you know, the number of proposals you turn in and their quality will be more successful. And that's a big part of the new Research Advancement Office, is looking at that at both the multidisciplinary level and the individual PI level. And we'll have more to say about that in the coming months as we put that plan together. I think the other way is partnerships, right? And that's a big theme, you know, within our research plan we developed in the past year, is enhancing partnerships with other universities, nearby national laboratories like Pacific Northwest National Lab and so on. That's also opportunities for student training.
So we want to leave a little time to gather afterwards, I believe. Is that right? Where's our planners? I think that's correct. And that's going to go on where? Outside here?
Just outside in the hallway.
Okay, outside. We'll certainly be available to answer any questions and have continuing dialogue. So that I make sure that Dan feels good leaving here. The first big question was, you know, is the med school going to suck all the money? Okay. The second one that I addressed was, is enrollment important? Okay, why do we increase in enrollment? Hopefully, we figured that one out. And the third one was, why are we at all these locations? Okay, and hopefully, you know, I hear those regularly. They're really good questions, and hopefully, we provided you enough meat behind it so that you can kind of understand a little bit better than you did an hour ago about why we might be doing these things. With that, we thank everybody for their participation and listening. Look forward to visiting with you a little bit more out front, and thanks again, and go Cougs. Without a commensurate increase in percentage of graduate students, we have tilted the ratio of undergraduate to graduate students at our institution. And we need to think about what that means and what the optimal ratio looks like, because it does not look like what it did 8 years ago. In terms of research, we've done a really great job expanding our research portfolio and our research outcomes. Obviously, one measure is research expenditures, and we've grown our research expenditures significantly over the last decade, and really have been able to hold on to those increases. Really, the sort of flat plateau in the last 5 years is an accomplishment, because obviously the number of opportunities for our scientists in which to pursue federal funding has been limited significantly during that time. But we've been able to hold our own when many universities have seen a dramatic fall off of their research expenditures. If you look at if you look at our discoveries, our disclosures, and our patents, we've increased those markedly, and this has been a conscious effort. Again, next slide, please. This has been a conscious effort on the part of us and our research faculty to really ramp up our commercialization efforts. And with the hard work of Anson Fatland and his group in economic development, we've seen a nice ramp up, if you will, in commercialization, in patents, in filings, et cetera. And finally, and this is an interesting slide, I think, this final slide. Thank you. If you look at, this is just a, you know, if you proxy the size of our institution using revenue, I'm an economist, so I guess that makes sense to me. You could use revenue or expenditures. It follows very much the same pattern. But we've dramatically increased the size of our university in terms of budget. But we'll talk about a little later how that composition of those revenues and those expenditures has changed dramatically over time. But just as we have increased the size of our institution, and that is a fact, and I think a significant accomplishment. If we think about the strategic direction of our university, over the past 4 months, I have visited with literally hundreds of policymakers, legislators, newspaper editors, industry leaders, alumni, mayors,
I guess if everybody's quiet, that means it's time to get started. Okay, my name is Rich Zach. I am the chair of the WSU Faculty Senate, and I have the honor and privilege of introducing our president, Daniel J. Bernardo, who was named interim president for the four-campus Washington State University system on July 7th, 2015, following the passing of Dr. Elson Floyd. On May 16th, 2014, Dan was named Provost and Executive Vice President of Washington State University. He served in the role on an interim basis from June 1, 2013 to May 15, 2014. Dan has extensive experience in higher education, including teaching, research, administration, and policy development. He served as Vice President for Agriculture and Extension and Dean of the College of Agricultural, Human, and Natural Resource Sciences from 2005 to 2013. Prior to moving to Washington State University, Dan was professor and department head of the Department of Agricultural Economics at Kansas State University from 1995 through 2005. And Dr. Bernardo, Dan has his PhD in agricultural economics from the Washington State University and a BS in agricultural and managerial economics from University of California, Davis. I've known Dan for a long time. I served as chair when he was the dean of the college, and he was a very good dean for the most part. Okay, as this is our, I'm going to take a little liberty. I apologize for doing this. If somebody yells at me afterwards, that's fine, but it's easier to get, forgiveness than it is permission. So this is our 125th anniversary, and I just wanted to do a very, very short reading from a book, Historical Sketch of the State College of Washington, 1890-1925, by our third president, Bryant. So this is the beginning of the university. The State College opens its doors. The State College of Washington opened its doors for instruction on the 13th day of January, 1892. The building, a one-story brick structure, 36 by 60 feet, the contract price of which was $1,500, stood on the summit of the hill where now, 1927, the old gymnasium stands. The brick wall forming the west end of the large room of the gymnasium formed the rear wall of the crib, as the little building for the infant college was later called by students. On the night of the 12th, one of the first students enrolled in the institution kept the fires burning in the stoves to dry the plaster and render the building endurable for the opening of the next day. So I think anybody that walks out of here, it tells you we have made a lot of progress since 1892. And I'm sure Dan is going to tell us about how we're going to continue that progress. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich. It's always a wild card when Rich introduces you. Came out fairly unscathed. I was at a conference, the Seattle Chamber Conference, and the person threw away the bio, and the night before she was out running around talking to our people about me so she could get some fun things. So this was Thursday night, or Thursday morning. And so she closed with the fact that I was a 49er fan, and I got a rousing set of boos from everybody. Well, first of all, thank you, everybody, for your attendance here. I know that there are people attending this virtually, and thank you for your attendance in that way. Of course, those folks at our urban campuses, as well as just those around this campus who like to sit in their office and get some work done while they're perhaps listening. So thank you to everybody throughout the system who have taken the time to come today so that we could have this dialogue. As a longtime WSU alum and as a kind of an avid Coug, it really is a humbling experience to serve in this role during this important stage of our university's history. When we look at this year, 2015, there's no doubt that this will be looked upon as one of the most transformational years in WSU's long and storied history. So far in 2015, as you know, we've celebrated our 125th anniversary, as Rich mentioned. We received a record $166 million in private support, during FY15, which concluded this year in July. We also received just about $200 million of extramural funding during that year to advance our research, our academic, and our extension missions. We wrapped up our campaign closing at $1.066 billion, which is just a tremendous accomplishment, really for everybody, not just the development staff, but that truly is a team effort. And when even Huskies will come up to me often and say how impressed they are how the university has handled this tragedy, and really some really unique things that followed the tragedy that kind of started off the beginning of the school year, including the smoke. So at this point, I just want to thank everybody for, again, faculty, students, staff, the administration, the alumni, for all of their support and their resolve during this time, because we really have shined well as an institution. Now, during this transition period, we have elected consciously to move the university forward and not to sit back and wait for the next leader of Washington State to define where we need to go. As most of you know, Elson and I were close colleagues, we were close friends. We worked together for 8 years, the entire 8 years he was here. We shared a common vision of the modern land-grant university. And the regents and President Floyd, the last time I ever saw him, about 2 weeks before his death, were very clear in their direction, and that was to continue to push forward with the initiatives and the vision that he had put in place here. So we will continue, and we have continued to move forward with the vision that Elson had put in place with the leadership team here. And as you will hear and as you know, we are not short on initiatives as well, and we'll talk about some of those initiatives here shortly. So our accomplishments over the past several years have been impressive and encouraging, and I want to share just a few of those with you in slide form. If we think about our enrollment, and hopefully somebody's going to advance that, or am I advancing that? Okay, thank you. If we think about our enrollment here, this is a much larger university in terms of students than it was just 8 years ago. Our undergraduate enrollment in particular has grown significantly. We've grown about 30% over that time period across the system. We've grown at all campuses across our system. We've also grown in graduate and professional degrees, degree-seeking students, not to the same degree. And this is a highlight issue for us as we move forward, as we advanced our undergraduate enrollment without that everybody contributed to. We gained legislative authorization for the first medical school public medical school in over 70 years in this state. And we've completed several new facilities as you look across our campuses to, again, accommodate our growing academic enterprises. Those included the Wine Science Center at WSU Tri-Cities. If you haven't seen that and you're in the Tri-Cities, you should definitely stop by. The PACCAR building is nearing completion here in Pullman, and as you know, the Global Scholars Residence Hall opened on time, miraculously. Thank you, Olivia and her group. That was a very close call, but that opened. And if you haven't been to Global Scholars, which is over by the soccer field, you should do so, because they've kind of redefined what residential life is on a university campus. We've initiated some new capital projects, including the University Center in Everett, which we broke ground on last month, the Health Science Clinic in Spokane, again, which is under construction, as we talk. And we have begun planning and will break ground on 2 additional facilities here in Pullman, the digital classroom building, which will provide much needed state-of-the-art classroom space for our expanded teaching mission, and the multicultural center, which will be located over by the entrance of campus. This fall, we enrolled the largest number of students in the history of Washington State University, just a shade under 30,000 total students across the campus. This from a university that was really struggling and kind of hovering around 23,000 for several years. And finally, we developed the university's first comprehensive research plan in decades, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Obviously, 2015 will be also remembered on a very negative note as we lost our 10th president, Elson Floyd, to his battle with cancer. And obviously, his legacy will live forever at Washington State University and will guide us in the years to come. You know, the past 4 months, as I've served in this role, have really tested the mettle of this university. But I think we have exceeded all expectations, and that really is the result of the work of everybody. It doesn't have to do with me, it has to do with us, it has to do with every staff, faculty, and student.